40 days of pre-trial detention. This was the decision taken by the regional court in Warsaw in a closed session in the case of Volodymyr Z. The Ukrainian man was arrested on the basis of a European arrest warrant. He is wanted in Germany and is suspected of damaging the Nord Stream gas pipeline in 2022. His defense attorney has announced that he will file an appeal. The stakes are high for the Polish judiciary because extraditing Volodymyr Z to Germany is a direct route to the Kremlin, where the Ukrainian could face a show trial and, as a consequence, end up in a Russian labor camp, from which he may never return. Volodymyr Z lives and works in Poland, where he has a family. The blowing up of the Nord Stream gas pipeline is widely celebrated in Poland. The pipeline funneled natural gas from Russia to Germany, ensuring both European dependence on Russian gas and funding the Kremlin's war machine. Extraditing Volodymyr Z would be an act of submission to Berlin and a sidelining of Poland's national interest by the Polish government.
Wolność dla Wołodymyra, Norymberga, dla Putina.
With these chants in front of the district court in Warsaw, protesters supported Volodymyr Z, who is being pursued by the German authorities on suspicion of destroying the Nord Stream gas pipeline. The Ukrainian heard the Polish court's decision to extend his pre-trial detention for 40 days. The prosecutor requested an extension of the temporary detention for a period of 100 days, but the court decided to extend the temporary detention for 40 days. The basis for the extension of the temporary detention are the provisions binding on Poland under the European arrest warrant procedure. The court fears that the Ukrainian will flee Poland because a year ago the authorities did not find him at his place of residence when they were conducting proceedings against him. The court also mentioned that Volodymyr Z has 2 passports. Ukrainian citizens are allowed to have 2 passports, and my client obtained them legally. However, this whole discussion since Wednesday has also raised objections because this is not the merit of the case, and it should not be a reason for my client to be remanded in custody or not, because this would amount to indirectly punishing him for being allowed to have 2 passports in his home country. Volodymyr Z's defense attorney admitted that the suspect could submit both passports to the court. The Ukrainian was detained on the basis of a European arrest warrant issued by the Federal Court of Justice in Germany. Unfortunately, the message coming from the district court in Warsaw is that Ukrainian citizens who are accused of actions aimed at helping their country and in the interests of that country may be held in custody in Poland during the trial. The suspect's relatives say that they will fight for his release. We are very tired. We are in shock. I believe that this sentence is unfair and we will do everything we can to ensure that my husband does not go to prison and that he can cooperate with the authorities and the court while staying at home with his family. The defense requested that he be allowed to remain free, that is, not imprisoned. The court did not agree to this. The hearing was held in camera. Today, the court is ignoring the fact that he has had a relationship with Poland for over 3 years, lives here, runs a business, and has submitted an application to purchase real estate. Despite all these factors, the court is of the opinion that Ukrainian citizen Volodymyr Z might leave Poland. The case in which Volodymyr Z is a suspect concerns the destruction of 3 of the 4 Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines, which took place 3 years ago at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. And importantly, more than 7 months after the outbreak of full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. The gas pipeline connects Russia and Germany. In reality, Nord Stream was intended to make the European Union dependent on Russian gas. It was an economic tool in the hands of the criminal Vladimir Putin to bring the EU to its knees so that when Ukraine was attacked, it could not count on the support of these countries to help defend Ukraine. According to the German prosecutor's office, those responsible for blowing up Nord Stream rented a yacht from a German company with the help of intermediaries and on the basis of false identity documents. Divers were to have attached at least 4 explosive charges to the pipeline threads, and after the operation they would have been picked up by a driver and taken to Ukraine. If the Polish state does not show initiative, then this Ukrainian will probably end up in Germany, and in the future I would not rule out an exchange between Germany and Russia, because prisoner exchanges between the West and Russia do take place, and this Ukrainian, Volodymyr Z, may even end up in a Russian labor camp. Regardless of who actually blew up the gas pipeline, this situation is a test for the Polish state and above all for Donald Tusk's government. whether it stands on the side of the free world or on the side of war criminal Vladimir Putin, because the act of destroying the gas pipeline is a symbol of the clash between Western and Russian civilization. Handing Volodymyr Z over to Germany effectively means handing him over to Vladimir Putin, because today Germany is acting as Vladimir Putin's waiter, whose task is to deliver Vladimir Z to Moscow for Shoy trial. We cannot extradite Volodymyr Z today. This is also the opinion of Poles who protested in front of the district court in Warsaw. This is incomprehensible to me, since he is here on Polish territory and should not be extradited to Germany. Tusk's government was established here to fulfill Berlin's wishes. The Germans have never been our friends. They have always been in cahoots with Russians. They took part in the petitions. They took part in World War II. From the very beginning, this government has been a Russian-German agency. In turn, a demonstration of solidarity with Ukrainian citizens took place in front of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines were supposed to supply Germany with gas and oil. Russia is now waging war with this money. Russia is now murdering innocent people in Ukraine with this money. Volodymyr Z is yet to be proven guilty of anything. If the Germans now have to decide whether to indict this man or possibly convict him, then let them show their solidarity with Ukraine. For years, Germany has been pursuing a pro-Kremlin policy, doing business with Russia and supporting each other economically. Successive invasions of wars have not prevented Germany from cooperating with Putin's Russia. The Nord Stream gas pipeline doesn't just cause Europe's energy dependence on its primary enemy, but above all, it finances war crimes in Ukraine. At one point, Radosław Sikorski stated that the Nord Stream 2 project was a new version of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. And the person responsible for blowing up the Russian-German gas pipeline opposed this pact.
On Saturday, October 4th, in Georgian capital Tbilisi, clashes erupted during the mass demonstrations against the rigging of the municipal election. This was the biggest election since the end of the last year. The observers says about dozens of thousands of people or even more. But yet the tiny fraction of these people tried to attack the presidential palace. And these pictures of fire, of clashes, of fighting pretty much covered up the whole peaceful protests. This is just another leg of the crisis that is dragging on since 2024, when Georgian Dream, the ruling party, decided to leave the path to integration with European Union and transatlantic community and move closer to Russia and to Vladimir Putin. The population, fiercely anti-Russian, was protesting that and is protesting all the time. Salome Zurabishvili, former president of Georgia, said that, according to her information, these clashes were fabricated. They were not genuine. They were staged because the government wanted to cover up the forging of the election and also try to blame the opposition for armed resistance, which is, of course, another step from the delegitimization of the opposition parties.
All those who support peaceful protests are here tonight on Rustaveli Avenue. We will stand here and continue to protest against election fraud and Russian Putinism, and we will do so without resorting to violence, which would help the government discredit the protests. None of those gathered here support the government's staged actions to seize the presidential palace by force. I do not support this either, and I am the democratically elected president. After the demonstration, Prime Minister Irakli Kobachidze announced severe consequences for the organizers of what he described as acts of violence. They face up to 9 years in prison. According to the Prime Minister, Saturday's demonstration was an attempt to overthrow the government. Pro-government media report calls from the stage for a forceful takeover of the presidential palace. Kobachidze even accused the European Union ambassador to Georgia, Paweł Herczyński, of attempting to interfere in the electoral process. Last year, the European Union ambassador directly interfered in our democratic elections by openly calling on voters to support the opposition. Let us not forget that the EU spokesperson also publicly supported the protests. It is not only Georgian citizens who criticize the unfair electoral process. Former Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, who holds the office of High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs, and European Commissioner for Enlargement Marta Kos, sharply criticized not only the persecution of the opposition by the authorities, but also the refusal to accept international election observers. We urge calm and restraint in the post-election period and call on the authorities to uphold citizens' rights to freedom of assembly and expression. A constructive and inclusive dialogue involving all political actors in civil society is essential, and we call on every side to refrain from violence. Finally, the European Union firmly rejects and condemns disinformation regarding the EU's role in Georgia and denounces the personal attacks against the ambassador of the European Union to Georgia. The position of the European Commission was echoed today by the Embassy of the Republic of Poland, which, last Friday, advised its citizens to avoid the protests. Meanwhile, the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated, "A sad day for democracy in Georgia. OSCE/ODIHR unable to observe local elections, recommendations unaddressed, regrettable use of violence. Repressive laws and jailing opposition leaders further undermine trust in Georgia's elections." Meanwhile, the aim of the demonstration was to protest against the rigging of yet another election, this time local elections. Most opposition parties did not field their own candidates for local government, but some groups saw this as an opportunity to achieve a good result in the opposition-minded capital. If successful, this would have been a serious blow to the current authorities. However, the best opposition candidate received just over 12% of the vote, while the pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party candidate received over 70%. Clearly, the city's citizens considered these elections a farce, as only a third of them went to the polls on Saturday. This disappointment with the democratic process may be a wake-up call for the authorities. The political crisis in France continues. President Emmanuel Macron has accepted the resignation of Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu. The resignation came less than a month after his appointment, making him the shortest-serving Prime Minister in the history of the Fifth Republic, which began in 1958. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu realized his hopeless situation when both allies and political enemies threatened to overthrow the new government. Lecornu stated that this meant he would not be able to do his job. On this Monday morning, I no longer see myself able to fulfill my duties as a Prime Minister, and I cannot allow the government to appear before the National Assembly tomorrow. We must listen to our supporters, but we must always think of all French men and women. Thank you all. Thank you. The composition of the main ministries has not changed significantly from the previous cabinet, as it was to be formed by President Emmanuel Macron's camp, with the support of the right-wing Republicans. The composition of the government was immediately criticized by the left-wing France Unbowed and the right-wing National Rally. I call on President Macron to dissolve the National Assembly, because we have reached the end of the road and there is no solution. There will be no tomorrow. Therefore, the only wise decision in these circumstances, in accordance with the Constitution of the Fifth Republic, is to return to the ballot box. Let the French people show us a new direction. To remedy this situation, we must get to the heart of the problem, which is to question the legitimacy of the President of the Republic in a way that our parliamentary democracy allows. And what institutional options do we have? There is one, the impeachment of the President of the Republic. The residents of the capital did not hide their concern and disapproval of the political class in the deepening political crisis in France. I expected this because President Macron doesn't listen to anyone, and it took him a month to appoint a government that is almost identical to the previous one. So we expected this. Nothing has changed. I think now the parliament will have to be dissolved, and we will have to vote again. Perhaps the president will have to step down. At some point, a new majority will have to emerge to form a stable government and solve the problems France is facing today. The previous elections were held in France in the summer of 2024, following Macron's decision to dissolve the parliament. Unfortunately, they did not produce a stable parliament. None of the three main political forces obtained a majority, allowing them to form a government on their own. After these elections, two minority governments were formed, one by the centrist parties, Macron's political camp, and the other by the Republicans. Both governments, the first led by Michel Barnier and the second by Francis Bayrou, were forced to resign due to a vote of no confidence passed by the opposition in parliament. I'm approaching 80. I've never seen anything like this. Everyone is playing for themselves. Everyone wants to have it their way. This is not normal. I'm ashamed to be French.
C'est pas normal.
Let us recall that Le Cornu was the 5th Prime Minister of France in less than 2 years. Now may be time for the right wing, and this is in line with the trend observed recently. Karol Nawrocki in Poland, Andrej Babis in the Czech Republic, the victory of the right wing in Austria, and the rise of right-wing Eurosceptic movements in the Netherlands, Germany, Sweden, Hungary, and even in the United Kingdom. Commentators are increasingly daring to predict a future right-wing dominated European Parliament.
Either a breakthrough or further bloody war. Negotiations that have begun in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt are expected to provide an answer as to what happens next.
In an agreement with the Trump administration, talks will be confined to a few days maximum, with no tolerance for maneuvers that will delay talks by Hamas. Israel is standing by the 72-hour deadline from the moment all details are solidified with Hamas.
The peace plan was presented last week by US President Donald Trump, and to everyone's surprise, both Israel and Hamas agreed to at least some of its provisions and expressed their willingness to discuss the rest. This is the first real chance of peace in a long time.
This plan consists of two parts. The first part is releasing all the hostages. Israel makes a tactical withdrawal, stays in Gaza. And then the second part is meant to demilitarize Gaza and disarm Hamas. That will be negotiated.
Tomorrow marks 2 years since the current exceptionally bloody phase of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict began. It will be the second birthday of this Palestinian boy, Ali, who has never known a world without war. From the first day until now, every day has been worse than the one before. I pray for this war to end, so that my son can start living a safe, normal life. Both sides want security and a return to normality. When you see people on the streets, you get the impression that they have aged about 10 years since October the 7th. So I think that we are all ready to end this war and get back to life, get back to business. The conflict began on October the 7th, 2023. Palestinian Hamas militants broke into Israeli territory, brutally murdering 1,200 people. They kidnapped 250 others, including children and women, and are still holding nearly 50 people captive. Their fate is unknown. All of Israel and the families of those kidnapped learn in what conditions the hostages are being held and whether they are still alive from Hamas propaganda videos like this one. This is the second time we are standing here commemorating the day when everything fell apart, and they, the hostages, are not far from here, screaming when no one can hear them. 731 days. For us, it's 2 years. For them, it's an eternity. Eli, one of the Israelis kidnapped by Hamas, was released after more than a year. Every day we tried to survive in tunnels where there was almost no light, where you have no running water, you don't have enough food, there are bugs and cockroaches everywhere. We prayed every morning. We tried to exercise even though we were chained with iron chains for 491 days. What kept him going was his family, his wife and 2 daughters. At the time, he didn't know that they had been murdered by Palestinians. He found out a few hours after his release. The day of my release is very complicated for me. On the one hand, my captivity is over. But on the other hand, I understand that I have no family. My wife and daughters are gone, as is my brother, whom they also killed. It is, among other things, such extreme experiences on both sides of the conflict that make peace talks extremely difficult. And the very fact that they are taking place is considered to be an enormous success for the American president. Donald Trump has been trying to end the bloody conflict in the Middle East since the beginning of his term of office.